My Weird School Fast Facts: Explorers, Presidents, and Toilets. Written by Dan Gutman. Pictures by Jim Pelot. Chapter 4: The Declaration of Independence. So, the Revolutionary War had been going on for a year when the colonists decided that, gee, maybe it would be a good idea to declare that we are a separate country from England. Thomas Jefferson from Virginia was given the job of putting that declaration in writing. Jefferson wrote the first draft of the Declaration of Independence, but some other guys helped him, and two of them were Benjamin Franklin and John Adams. All in all, 86 changes were made to Jefferson's first draft. This is the most famous sentence in the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. By the way, the word independence never appears in the Declaration of Independence. Signing the Declaration was dangerous. The signers were committing treason against their king and the British government. Treason was a crime, punishable by death. In fact, Benjamin Franklin told the group, "We must all hang together, or assuredly we shall all hang separately." Ben Franklin was a riot. I bet he was a lot of fun at parties. Here's a good question to ask your parents. How many of the men who signed the Declaration of Independence were born in the United States? The answer? None of them. They couldn't have been born in the United States because the United States didn't exist as a country until they signed the Declaration. In fact, the first time the words United States of America appeared, it was in the Declaration of Independence. The first person to sign the Declaration was John Hancock, because he was the president of the Continental Congress. He wrote his name really big, almost 5 inches wide. Because of that, his name became part of the language. If you ever hear somebody say, "Put your John Hancock here," it means to sign your name there. Benjamin Franklin was 70 years old, and he was the oldest person to sign the Declaration. The two youngest signers were Thomas Lynch Jr. and Edward Rutledge. Both of them were 26, and both were from South Carolina. 24 of the 56 signers were lawyers, and all the signers were men. Not a single woman signed the Declaration. That's not fair. 2 future presidents signed the Declaration, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. When the Declaration was signed in 1776, the population of the United States was about 2.5 million people. Today it's over 323 million. 200 copies of the Declaration were printed. Only 26 of them are still around. If you find one, hang on to it. In 1989, a guy bought an old picture frame for $4 at a flea market in Pennsylvania. And you'll never believe in 1,100 years what he found behind the picture. One of those 200 declarations. Wow! The TV producer Norman Lear bought it for more than $8 million. The original signed parchment copy of the Declaration is at the National Archives building in Washington, D.C. You can go see it there. It has only left the capital twice. The first time was when the British attacked Washington during the War of 1812. The second time was during World War II. In the 2004 movie National Treasure, a guy has to steal the Declaration so he can read a secret message written on the back of it. There actually is writing on the back, but it's no secret message. It just says, Original Declaration of Independence dated 4th July, 1776. Speaking of the 4th of July, one of our presidents was born on that date, Calvin Coolidge, and here's an amazing coincidence. Two of the founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, both died on the 4th of July in 1826, and that was exactly 50 years after the first Independence Day. That's weird. Here's the thing. We celebrate the 4th of July as our Independence Day, but the Declaration of Independence wasn't signed on July 4th. What? You mean the 4th of July is bogus? Calm down, Arlo. Here's what really happened. On July 2nd, the Second Continental Congress met in Philadelphia and voted in favor of independence. They spent the next 2 days revising Thomas Jefferson's draft. On July 4th, they officially adopted the Declaration. But they didn't sign it that day. Most of the delegates signed it on August 2nd. Two of them, John Dickinson and Robert R. Livingston, never signed at all. On July 9th, George Washington read the Declaration out loud in front of City Hall. The cheering crowd got so riled up that they tore down a nearby statue of King George III. And do you know what they did with it? They melted it down and made it into more than 42,000 musket balls for the American Army. It must have helped. After 7 years of bloody fighting, the British finally surrendered, and the United States of America was a free and independent country. Yay! I knew all that. You did not. Chapter 5. The Constitution. Here's a little quiz, Arlo. After the United States declared our independence and won the Revolutionary War, what did we need to do next? Go to the bathroom? That war lasted years. We must have been holding it in for a long time. No, Arlo. We needed a constitution. I bet you don't even know that a constitution is the system of values and laws that's used to govern a country. I knew that. In fact, I even know that our first constitution back in 1781 was called the Articles of Confederation. But that was when the United States was just a bunch of unconnected states. In 1786, Alexander Hamilton called for a meeting in Philadelphia, where they decided to write a new constitution that would tie all the states together. Wow, I'm impressed. I thought you only cared about video games and skateboarding. I remember this stuff by imagining the founding fathers skateboarding and playing video games while they were writing the Constitution. Actually, the Constitution was written in the same building in Philadelphia where the Declaration of Independence was signed, and the building is still there today. It's called Independence Hall. 12 of the 13 states sent representatives to work on the Constitution. The only state that didn't send anyone was Rhode Island. I guess they had something more important to do that day. Actually, it was because they didn't want a powerful national government meddling in their business. That too. And the whole thing was top secret. They wrote the Constitution behind locked doors that were guarded by sentries. Do you know who was chosen to be the president of the convention, Arlo? Chuck Norris? No, dumbhead. It was George Washington. I knew that too. It took the whole summer of 1787 to write the Constitution. And after all that, it's only 4 pages long. That's just 1 page a month. But it was a really important document, so they wanted to get it right. It's the oldest and shortest constitution of any major government in the world. The Constitution has 4,400 words in it. I counted. That's about half as long as a My Weird School book. My Weird School books have a great opening. They all start with the words, "My name is AJ and I hate." What does the Constitution start with? "We the people." Well, that's pretty good too. Believe it or not, after all that careful work, there are spelling errors in the Constitution. The most obvious one is right above the signers' names. A delegate from Pennsylvania spelled his own state Pennsylvania. Boy, that guy must have been a real dumbhead. He couldn't even spell his own state. Pennsylvania must be really hard for people to spell. It's also misspelled on the Liberty Bell. Too bad they didn't have spell check in those days. While they were writing the Constitution, they had a lot of arguments. Kind of like us, huh? Yeah, one of the biggest fights they had was over slavery. Some of the states wanted to get rid of it. Other states wanted to keep it. In the end, to hold the country together, they agreed to let slavery continue. But that didn't exactly end the argument, because 74 years later, we fought a civil war over the same issue. Finally, on September 17th, 1787, the Constitution was finished and it was ready to be signed. 39 men, yes, they were all men, of course, signed it. George Washington and James Madison were the only presidents who signed the Constitution. Thomas Jefferson and John Adams never signed it. Do you know why? Because they were in the bathroom? No, Arlo. They were in other countries. Thomas Jefferson was representing the United States in France, and John Adams was doing the same thing in England. Maybe they were going to the bathroom in other countries. What is it with you and bathrooms, Arlo? Bathrooms have nothing to do with the history of the United States. That's where you're wrong, Andrea. You'll see what I mean in Chapter 13. What's in Chapter 13? Oh, you'll find out. Did you know that the youngest signer of the Constitution was Jonathan Dayton of New Jersey? He was just 26. The oldest signer was 81-year-old Benjamin Franklin. He could hardly walk, so he was carried into the convention hall every day in a sedan chair by prisoners from the local jail. That's true, and when Franklin was signing the Constitution, he got so emotional that tears were streaming down his face. Either that or they were cutting onions in the next room. I think I should just ignore you. Only 6 people signed both the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. They were Benjamin Franklin, George Read, Roger Sherman, Robert Morris, George Clymer, and James Wilson. When the Constitutional Convention was over, Benjamin Franklin pointed at the symbol of a half sun on George Washington's chair. He said, I have the happiness to know that it is a rising and not a setting sun. Speaking of George Washington, he was the guy who formally established the first Thanksgiving in 1789. It had nothing to do with pilgrims or Native Americans or turkeys. The reason for the new holiday was to give thanks for the new Constitution. Nobody's perfect. The Constitution wasn't perfect, of course. Nothing's perfect. Well, except for me, of course. But the Founding Fathers knew the world was going to change, and they were smart enough to know they should let future generations make changes in the Constitution. Over 11,000 changes or amendments have been introduced in Congress. Only 27 of them have been approved. The first 10 became known as the Bill of Rights. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery. The 19th Amendment gave women the right to vote. The 28th Amendment gives kids the right to stay home from school whenever they feel like it. Well, that last one hasn't been ratified yet, but it should be.